Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are setting aside the usual image, the polished global superstars, and really plunging into the gritty origins of one of the biggest bands ever.
Yeah, the really unglamorous start.
Exactly. Forget the screaming crowds, the world tours for a minute. We're taking you back to Hamburg, Germany, August 17th, 1960, to be precise. Our sources really paint a picture of the foundational moment for the Beatles. Just five young guys trying to make a sound in a pretty seedy club, under a lot of pressure and just fighting exhaustion.
That's spot on. I mean, if you really want to get what powered Beatlemania later on, you have to understand this period. This wasn't some casual rehearsal. It was more like uh, a grueling 2-month boot camp for performing.
Boot camp, yeah.
So our mission here is to pull out those surprising details. The workload, the pay, the frankly appalling living conditions that sort of acted as this intense pressure cooker, and then connect that hardship to how they developed that legendary endurance.
Okay, so the setting is the Indra Club, right? On Grosse Freiheit Street. And we should probably mention the lineup because it's not the Fab Four everyone knows.
Right. Important detail. At this point, it was John Lennon, George Harrison, Pete Best on drums, Paul McCartney, and Stuart Sutcliffe on bass. 5 lads from Liverpool, basically, about to get a serious dose of reality.
So let's kick off with the contract, because the commitment they signed up for versus what they actually got paid, it's kind of mind-blowing. They landed there on Wednesday, August 17th, 1960.
And they were thrown right in. The deal was for 48 nights straight at the Indra Club alone. That took them up to October 3rd. But the whole arrangement, the expectation was for 2 solid months ending around October 16th. That's a marathon for any band, let alone one still figuring things out.
A marathon paid in, well, peanuts practically. The sources say their daily wage was 30 Deutschmarks per person. If you translate that back to 1960 pounds sterling, it's about £2.50 a day.
£2.50. For what was essentially, like you said, a full-time, physically demanding job. And what's really interesting from a business angle is how they got paid weekly, right? Every Thursday. But their manager at the time, Alan Williams, he was getting a separate £10 commission every week.
Wait, £10? Just for him?
Yep. So the guy who brokered the deal was making a pretty decent chunk compared to what the entire band was earning for working multiple long nights.
Wow. It really sounds like they were just paid enough to keep them there, right? Like just enough to eat and not leave.
Exactly. It kind of ensured they couldn't really afford to just pack up and go home, or even afford to rest properly, which, ties that low pay directly into the next really crucial thing, the schedule, that punishing schedule.
Okay, yeah, let's shift from the money, or lack thereof, to the clock. Because this workload seems to be the absolute core of how they transformed. The club owner, Bruno Koschmider, he basically forced them into becoming a tight unit, didn't he? The hours alone demanded they get good fast.
Oh, absolutely. They had to evolve. On weekdays, just your average Monday to Friday, they had to play 4.5 hours. Grueling hours, split into 4 sets. Think about sustaining that energy. 8:00 to 9:30 p.m., then a break. 10:00 to 11 p.m., another break. 11:30 p.m. to 12:30 a.m., and then the last slog, 1:00 a.m. till 2 a.m.
4.5 hours every single weekday night. Wow.
Every single weekday. And if you think that's tough, the weekends. That's where the real test was. Saturdays. A full 6 hours on stage.
6 hours? How did they even structure that?
Get this, 7:00 to 8:30 p.m., 9:00 to 10:00 p.m., 10:30 to 11:30 p.m., midnight to 1:00 a.m., and then the final push from 1:30 a.m. all the way to 3 p.m.
That's insane. And Sunday wasn't a day off, I'm guessing.
No rest.
Yeah.
Sunday was also 6 hours, just slightly different times. Broken into 6 sets, running from 5 in the evening right through to 1:30 in the morning.
Okay, hold on. If they're playing 5-6 hours a night, 6 or 7 nights a week, how did they keep it up? And what about songs? They must have burned through their entire repertoire in, 2 nights.
And that's the key, isn't it? That's the analytical point. That sheer volume forced them to change fundamentally. They couldn't just rely on their 10 favorite rock and roll covers. No way.
They'd have been repeating themselves constantly.
Exactly. They had learned hundreds, literally hundreds of songs. Anything and everything, rock standards, ballads, country tunes, R&B, even German folk songs sometimes, apparently, just to fill the silence.
So it wasn't just about playing endurance, it was about building this massive musical library on the fly.
Precisely. And it also forced them to develop stage presence. When you're playing to people who are maybe tired, maybe drunk, maybe just not paying attention for 6 hours, you can't just stand there looking at your shoes.
Right, you have to engage them somehow.
You have to. You develop banter, you develop energy, you find ways to grab their attention, partly out of fear of, getting sacked by Koschmider.
Mhm.
That raw, energetic, almost relentless stage presence they became famous for. A lot of that was born out of sheer desperation in Hamburg, trying to fill those hours for 2 quid 50.
That makes so much sense. They became this tight performing unit because, well, failure meant not getting paid, maybe getting kicked out, not just a bad review in the paper.
Totally. Survival drove innovation.
Okay, so let's zoom in on that very first night. August 17th, 1960, they arrive, they've got this contract. The reality must have hit them like a ton of bricks, right? The sources say they were tired and hungry when they actually got on stage.
Yeah, imagine the journey, the anticipation, and then that.
Yeah.
And the audience certainly didn't help matters. It wasn't a packed house of eager fans. It was just a handful of people. Mostly, the sources say, sex workers from the area, and maybe some of their clients just ducking in for a bit.
Not exactly the Cavern Club crowd.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
A tough, maybe indifferent, world-weary audience.
Yeah.
And you could almost picture the band's reaction. The sources describe them playing that first 4.5-hour set, basically huddled together and stock still, just kind of intimidated.
Yeah, feeling cowed by their unfamiliar surroundings. They were just kids, really, in this pretty intimidating red light district environment.
And then, to add insult to injury, their attempt to blast out some rock and roll got shut down almost immediately. By the boss, Koschmider. He made them turn their amps down.
The Beatles turning down. Why on earth? That sounds almost sacrilegious.
Well, get this. Apparently, the woman who lived in the flat directly above the Indra Club complained about the noise.
No way.
Yes. Think about that. The band that would later define loud, stadium-filling rock basically being told to keep it down on their very first gig because of a noise complaint from upstairs. It's almost comical, but it perfectly sums up how low-key and, frankly, how low status their start was.
That detail just changes everything. They weren't aiming for the stars yet. They were just trying not to annoy the neighbors.
Sure.
Incredible.
It really grounds the whole story, doesn't it?
It does. And this pressure, this environment, it was all presided over by this guy, Bruno Koschmider. He owned the Indra and also the Kaiserkeller nearby, right? He doesn't sound like much of a music visionary.
No, not at all. The descriptions paint him as, well, not very inspiring. An old guy, maybe crippled in the war, had a noticeable limp. And the band's own take was pretty blunt. He just didn't seem to know much about music or anything.
So just a businessman running clubs.
Pretty much. A proprietor using cheap young bands to fill the hours and sell drinks.
Yeah.
Apparently they only saw him about once a week, usually when they had to go chase him down for their wages. Doesn't sound like a warm relationship.
Meanwhile, Hamburg itself. That must have been a huge contrast. They're stuck in this dingy club, but the city around them was probably buzzing, right?
Oh, absolutely. They mentioned the good parts, the big lake, the feeling of a proper big city. But then there was their area, the St. Pauli district, the Reeperbahn, Grosse Freiheit, what they called the dirty part.
The red light district, basically.
Exactly. And it was this mix of, like, thrilling but also dangerous. Neon lights everywhere, clubs competing for attention, loads of sailors, sex workers, tourists. Even though their specific circumstances were grim, they admitted the area itself, the sheer energy of it, looked really good. It was this total collision of glamour and, well, sleaze.
And their own living situation was definitely on the sleazy side of things. Those initial accommodations, it sounds almost like something out of a bad comedy sketch.
It really does. That first night, Koschmider apparently put them up in his own flat, all 5 of them, sharing one single bed.
5 guys in one bed.
5 guys, 1 bed. And here's the kicker. They later described that night as a positive luxury.
Which tells you everything you need to know about where they ended up after that first night. So where did they actually live?
Their more permanent lodging was arranged at the back of a small, rundown cinema. The Bambi Kino, it was called, right near the end of Grosse Freiheit Street.
Okay, back of a cinema sounds potentially grim. What was the reality?
Oh, it was worse than grim. We're not talking about a little apartment.
Yeah.
It was basically like disused storage rooms right next to the cinema's toilets, which apparently stank.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Often unheated, damp, definitely dirty. Zero privacy, zero comfort. Just imagine trying to sleep or relax in those conditions after playing for 6 hours straight. The cold, the smell, the lack of sanitation. It was constant physical discomfort.
So you combine that, the hunger, the cold, the lack of sleep, sleeping next to smelly toilets with the relentless pressure of performing for hours on end, you can really see how that would forge a certain kind of resilience
Where?
or desperation.
It's the perfect storm, isn't it? The ultimate high-pressure incubator. They had to channel all that discomfort, that grit, that exhaustion, that sheer need into their music, into their performance. There was literally nothing comfortable in their lives to fall back on. They had to get better just to survive the experience.
Yeah, it forced them to rely purely on their energy and their music. No safety net.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Low pay, crazy hours, a rough stage, even rougher sleeping conditions.
Yeah.
It was the perfect recipe, oddly enough, for forging that tough, unbreakable stage presence.
Yeah.
They couldn't coast. They had to win over every single person, every single night, with pure, raw energy.
So wrapping this up then, it's just incredible to think about this legendary band known for slick production, massive fame. They didn't start with a bang. They started with being tired, hungry, playing to maybe a dozen indifferent people, getting told to turn down, and then sleeping rough next to cinema toilets.
It's a story of mastering the craft through sheer grinding necessity, isn't it?
Totally.
It really underlines the value of, well, the ugly beginnings. That whole Hamburg baptism by fire, it was about building the stamina, building that huge song list, learning how to handle anything a crowd or a situation could throw at them, all while basically living in this state of constant low-level crisis. They had to be loud enough, funny enough, good enough just to make it to Thursday's payday,
Right.
which leads to a kind of provocative thought maybe for you listening, something to mull over. If the Beatles hadn't had that rough start, if they'd been booked straight into, say, a nice clean venue, decent pay, maybe just playing polite one-hour sets, would they ever have developed that raw, unpredictable, slightly dangerous edge that made them so magnetic? Does real mastery, that kind of deep resilience, actually require going through the grinder first? Does it need that pressure cooker of just unglamorous, relentless hard work to burn away the weaknesses?
That's a really interesting question. Did the hardship make them?
Something to think about, definitely. The next time you hear a truly legendary performer, maybe wonder about their own Hamburg.